Hello, hi there, everybody. Everybody in the group, hello and welcome to this free training that has been promised on core wounds. So, in this free training, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at what is a core wound, why, how to spot them, why they are so important in understanding and therapeutic practice, and what needs to happen for them in order for them to dissolve primarily. So I'm hoping to keep this very short and sweet. It's an introduction really to what core wounds are. It's an introduction and hopefully an opening to help you understand what when your clients come with core wounds and really being able to spot it and being able to maybe articulate that to the client. I think there's nothing better than context for our clients. There's nothing better than context for the human condition. So when we understand what's happening, what's amazing is that we can work with it. So this training will last probably about 10 to 15 minutes, no more. And I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear your impact, how it has impacted upon you below in the comments. If you can let me know. If you're new to this group, you're very, very, very welcome. It is my hope that this group will be filled with these small trainings and then larger trainings and then the opportunity to work at a deeper level as we progress down the line. So if you're new, welcome. And if you're new, then please don't be afraid to say hello and introduce yourself to this lovely community. There's a lovely bunch of people here. So without further ado, we'll begin. So core wounds, what are they? Core wounds for me, my understanding of core wounds came through me. And if any of you want to look at how that happened, there's an entire TED talk. I'm not going to waste your time here with that. And we'll make sure that that's available within the group for you. But core wounds for me are these intense feelings, these intense somatic experiences that incorporate the entireness, for want of a better word, of the human experience emotionally, physically. I mean, just the entire experience that happens when we have these difficult moments in life. Some people call them traumatic moments, some people don't see them as traumatic. But I think when a core wound is born, there is a level of trauma that has taken place. Now, that trauma doesn't have to be newsworthy, in that it doesn't have to always be child abuse, it doesn't have to be, bombings, it doesn't have to be these big newsworthy events. When the body and mind is overwhelmed by an event, that is trauma. And that is what happens, I believe, when a core wound is born. A core wound is born in a moment or a collective set of moments where there is a belief about self or a belief about the world and what the world can provide is born. And that core wound gets locked into the body somatically. It gets locked in a way that it gets trapped in the body. Now, it has its own unique somatic pattern. It has its own unique somatic set of experiences, feelings, processing feelings, and it has its own uniqueness. Now, this feeling pattern, this somatic pattern gets locked into the body. And on top of that, what happens is the meaning that is given the mind, the meaning that the mind gives to what has happened in that moment or those set of moments gets locked in alongside the somatic pattern. Now, when that happens, that is often seen as a truth to our experience. It's seen as a truth, as a reality, that we are exactly as we have interpreted. We are these, and it depends on the pattern, the language pattern that gets trapped in. So we interpret ourselves as bad, as wrong, as evil, as horrible, as useless, as worthless, whatever the difficulty is that gets trapped in. We interpret ourselves in this way. We interpret the world in this way. And that is what gets trapped, that meaning at a cognitive pattern level. And then its accompanying somatic pattern gets trapped in the body. Now, what normally happens is that we just believe it, we wrap it up, we put it away, and we move on with life. And what we know and what I know about these somatic patterns and these cognitive patterns is they don't go anywhere. Often they lay dormant, often they lay dormant within the body, often they lay dormant within the psyche. And it's only whenever they're triggered. And here is the difficulty with core wounds. Core wounds are seldomly triggered fully in the way that they were born. That is to say, that if your core wound was just, for example, useless, it doesn't have to be triggered in the fullness of uselessness as an external experience. It can just be slightly triggered. You can sometimes we can just even be near useless or the fear of useless to have the entire experience rebirthed again. And this is what's incredibly important to understand for your client base. Sometimes they're not experiencing the totality of the wound in that it has never happened again outside that first moment. But something about it has triggered the somatic pattern. Something about it has triggered the somatic experiencing. And that's what's extremely, extremely important to understand from your client's perspective. I'll break that down a wee bit further, hopefully to help you understand it. If the somatic pattern was born with 5 or 6 physical symptoms and emotions, like maybe whooshing in the body, maybe pins and needles, maybe a deep sense of pain in the body, maybe in the tummy, and maybe another few difficult emotions alongside it, like shame or blame. Any one of those parts of that somatic pattern that would be triggered would cause the entire pattern to trigger again. And that's what is so confusing for our clients, is that it's not the same in its entirety as the first time it happened. It just is enough for the body to understand part of that somatic pattern to be fully triggered again. And the same happens in the cognitive pattern. If the cognitive pattern in any form or fashion is triggered, so if uselessness is felt or understood, or may even be a part of the future understanding, then the body responds in the same way, in a total way, even if uselessness is a possibility and not a reality. I hope this is beginning to make sense. It's complicated, but it's not as well. It's quite profound. It's really, really, really important to understand. So our clients are walking around with a somatic pattern and a thought-based pattern that is multi-layered and that is actually really intricate. And any part of that that is triggered will create the same physical sensations, will create the same cognitive pattern as was on the first day that it was born, in that defining moment, in that piece of trauma, in that difficulty. Now, the client won't be able to see that. They won't be able to see what is happening. They won't be able to understand it. And they may just arrive in your office, because what happens is the mind tries to give meaning in the now to what has happened. So if a client has had an experience in childhood that it has locked away and never worked with or never understood, then what happens in the now is, if that pattern gets triggered, the client doesn't have any reference for it in the then and is just operating out of the now through this pattern. So what that means is that the client is only seeing and interpreting the feelings, the physical sensations, the somatic pattern and the cognitive pattern through this now, through this world. And what's happening is the client is seeing the feelings in the body, the somatic pattern and the thoughts of uselessness through their experience in this now. What happens there is they often blame others, they often point outwards, they often give you story of where and how and what this has happened. My experience is that every client that is ever set in front of me with a huge somatic pattern and a huge cognitive pattern that's driving them crazy, it's often never born, seldomly born in this now. And the story that they bring is seldomly where this pattern has been born. And so that's always my first check. Where has this been born? That's incredibly important for your client base, because when they understand that, they have context, they understand. And what it also does is it can prevent them from staying in story too long. It can prevent them from being caught in this now story, and it can also help them to settle down the somatic feeling. Now, what happens here is this: when the somatic feeling is born, when it's moving through the body, it can be the most powerful thing you have ever witnessed at a feeling level. If any of you are here, then and you've experienced any of this, this may be triggering some stuff for your own self. And you may be thinking, God, is that what a core feeling is? Is that what I have? Do I have a core wound? Even before you think about your clients, this is really, really, really important. Now, what happens is that whenever these wounds, as I call them, are activated, are awakened, what happens is the mind goes into free fall and the body is just trying its best to pull away from it. And these are when the most difficult behaviours arise, because we'll do anything. You see, the mind is set up to protect you from this stuff, not to deepen into it, but to protect you, to move away, to push it away, to shove it away. This is where the defences kick in. This is where all the old defences, and this is where all the old behaviours kick in, or new behaviours begin. So often our clients will come with a lot of behaviours, a lot of moving, a lot of soothing, a lot of protecting themselves from this wound. And that, if they have been triggered by a core wound from, they say, when the core wound was born, you were 4, and maybe they're 44, they'll have 40 years of managing this if they haven't locked it down completely. And in that 40 years of managing, they have maybe been to multiple therapists. They have maybe been in and out of therapy and never really been able to put their finger on the source of the wound. And also what they will have is they will have a mistrust of that inside themselves. And they'll also have a lot of management behaviours and a lot of defences around that. And that can be quite difficult for the client, because they don't want to be there. They want to be able to heal what is underneath it. And that is the work of the clearing system, I suppose, that we dig deep and underneath, guide the client back to the source and heal it from the source, because that is often what is wrong with our current mental health system. That what we do to our clients and to ourselves is we teach people to manage it, to soothe it, to move it, to trigger hunt, as I call it, or trigger manage. We are not looking to manage. It is impossible, literally impossible, to manage the triggers of a core wound, because they are so intricate. And often what happens is that one somatic feeling mimics another. And so it's an impossibility, and it's too difficult to go trigger hunting and try to stop the sources of triggers. That is a minefield for our clients. The best thing that we can do is bring them back into the body, bring them back into the source, bring them back into the difficulty within. And we've talked about that. You'll have seen the training and here on helping clients move back into themselves, the different processes of healing. We get the client back in, and what we do is we start to work in the core wound itself and dissolving from the inside out. We're not interested in the behaviours that are the products that come from the wound, because that's all the behaviours are, products of the wound. We're not interested in that. We're only interested in getting to the source and the site of the wound, so that what we can do is that we can hear it. We can hold it long enough to dissolve it, both somatically and cognitively. If we don't have an embodied approach to core wounds, then we can't get at it. My preferred way of doing this is to do it somatically first. The reason that I work somatically first when I'm working in clinical practice is because if I can dislodge the emotional content and the fragments of the emotional content, the somatic content, the thought has nowhere it has nowhere to hook onto. So it has no emotional content to hook onto. So often when I'm working, 99% of the time, I'll work somatically first. in order to dislodge the feeling, the relief of dislodging the feeling, the relief of what I call treating the wound. Can you imagine if you have 40 years of feeling this feeling, of being overwhelmed by the feeling, of having behaviors that protect the feeling, that move the feeling? Can you imagine what that will be like? To be able to stop that, to soothe that, to get out of that in lightning speed, and then to dissolve it for the rest of your days. So that's how I work. But this training, I suppose, is about awareness for you. It's about you seeing that your client is often operating out of core wounds. How can we tell? The pain is severe. Their inability to sit close to it is severe. It has both a somatic and cognitive pattern that is very, very, very alive in the body, and the client is scrambling really, really, really difficultly to get away from it as best it can. Also, another indicator that this is a core wound is that the client has seen this time and time and time and time again, that it's not a new thing. If you ask a client, is this familiar? They'll say yes, and they'll be able to pinpoint exactly how familiar it is. It's an incredible process. So these are the indicators that our clients are working in core wounds. These are the indicators that no matter how much you try to manage their triggers, or how much you try to get them to think differently, or move differently around a core, or around their issue, that they can't, because it's their body that's leading the way. These are the indicators. And often when we are employ tactics like this in clinical practice, what we do is that we stop the client in process, and that's what happens. They then leave the therapeutic process because the deepening isn't happening for them. So just to recap again, core wounds come from the past. They are embedded in the body. They are embedded in the body and in the mind, and they tell a story, a narrative, a negative narrative about who we are and what this world has to offer. They often lay dormant until triggered, and when they're triggered, it's not the fullness of them that are triggered. Often it's just somatic pieces that are triggered. That's enough. One tiny somatic part of the trigger is enough to trigger the entire wound. That they're often old patterns, and that the client knows that they aren't of this now, that they have been managing these for a long time. And the client will do anything, and often has done anything, to get away and get out of these wounded parts. Hopefully that wee short snippet will help you understand what is happening for your client, give you more empathy, and maybe even begin to open up the conversation with your client about these wounds. So my hope is this helps you understand yourself better and understand your client base better. If you've any questions, put them down below. I'd love to hear what you thought about that. There's a lot on that for about 15 minutes, and 15 or 20 minutes, whatever it was. So hopefully that was enough for you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you for some more training next week, because we're going to bring you more training every single week like this. So see you all soon, and I hope you enjoyed it.